Getting into today's video, we've got some big discrepancies still going on between the models for next week's weather. Next week's weather is still very much up in the air, if you pardon the pun, and it looks as though we're going to see unsettled weather trying to come back in from the Atlantic, but the battle really is between high pressure to the northeast and low pressure in the Atlantic. Which one has the ascendancy next week is still open to some question, but it does look as though we're moving more towards the unsettled low pressure area, really taking control of the weather next week, with the high pressure over Scandinavia being forced back. Anyway, I'll get on with all that in a moment. Before I get on with the video, I just want to talk about the advertising, about you should be a video ad over there in my web videos at gazweathervids.com. Please play those video ads. You'll be supporting gazweathervids.com by doing that. So we're going to start off with the 500 millibar height anomaly charts. This just puts things into context about what's happening. 500 millibars, 18,000 feet, is an important area in the atmosphere, because that's where you get high pressure and low pressure developing. So as those high pressure and low pressure areas are moved around by the jet stream, that really gives us our weather. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. That's the basic gist of the idea. So we're looking at the anomalies at 500 millibars in 8 to 10 days time. So that's taking us towards next weekend actually, and the red and orange colours here indicate where we've got above average temperature at 500 millibars, and that consequently is where we're likely to be seeing above average pressure, high pressure basically. And the blue colours here indicating below average temperatures at 500 millibars, and that's where we're likely to be seeing below average pressure, low pressure. So this is the ECMWF here on the left, we've got the GFS on the right. So we can see that the ECMWF for 8 to 10 days time has basically got an upper trough here across the British Isles. We've got quite a deep below average temperature area here. That is an area of low pressure really sitting over the country. We've also got a southerly tracking jet stream, because these lines here indicating that the jet stream is generally running to the south of the country. But above average heights are to the east. We have got above average heights here, not only over Scandinavia but over much of Eastern Europe as well. But really this trough has pushed those above average heights for high pressure further back, and really it's the low pressure here that's dominating the weather on this ECMWF. It's actually a very unsettled looking chart, this one. And it's still quite warm though. It won't be cold, because with the high pressure to the east and the low pressure still sitting over us, we should generally be seeing winds from a southwesterly direction. So it shouldn't be too cold, but that is a very unsettled looking chart. We'll have a look at that in more detail with the generic charts from Weathercentral, because that's a very unsettled ECMWF run this morning. Now the GFS is a lot different. We've got a big, very extensive area of above average heights here over Scandinavia. Those above average heights are much further west towards British Isles. In fact, British Isles is under slightly above average heights there. We're actually under above average pressure, and that trough in the Atlantic is much weaker. It's centred around Iceland. It's much further back than it is on the ECMWF, and it's also a great deal weaker as well. So this is a much warmer, much more settled looking chart from the GFS, and very unusual really to see such big differences between the ECMWF, which is very unsettled, and the GFS, which is completely different. It's much more settled. Well, it's not completely different, it's sort of in the same area, but it's much more settled. And the reason is, as I say, this area of above average heights with high pressure to the northeast is far more dominant than it is on the ECMWF. It's much stronger, it's more dominant, and it's much further west towards the British Isles. So if we have a look at the generic charts, this is for GFS first of all, and we can see that for a week's time we've got weak pressure here. There's the above average heights to the northeast of the country over Scandinavia. There's the main area of low pressure out in the Atlantic. We're sort of in this no man's land for the start of next week. We're probably bringing a trough through here, so we probably do bring some rain through at the start of next week. We're going to have some thundery showers on Sunday, and then early next week we probably do bring this weak area of low pressure up from the south. So I think even on the GFS we are looking at some wet weather early next week. But then as we move through towards the second half of next week, we'll start to find that high pressure ring intensifying again, and this low pressure stalls out in the Atlantic. So by the time we get through to Saturday the 18th, so this is coming up to the 10-day period, we are finding that high pressure really becoming dominant again over Scandinavia. The low pressure is weak over Iceland, and that high pressure is really taking control. Although even here it's not completely settled. We're probably bringing in some showers with this. It's not a complete settled scenario, but it's basically quite settled for most of us. And 10 days out, Sunday the 19th of August, that high pressure is still there over Scandinavia. The low pressure is much weaker up to the northwest of the country around Iceland, and really the high pressure is dominant, although we have got a weak sort of trough here in the southeast, may bring some showers, but really the high pressure is in control. So showery start to next week, certainly on the GFS, and many settles down, but the ECMWF doesn't settle down. And if we run through these charts through next week, we see that this area of low pressure becomes very dominant, indeed moving in off the Atlantic. And look at that chart for Thursday the 16th of August, a very deep area of low pressure there, 990 millibars. We've got tightly packed isobars. There'll be a lot of heavy rain if this is right sweeping across the country, and it's not all that warm really, although it does get a bit warmer then as going to Friday the 17th, those winds going to the southwest. But the low pressure is in control here. Look how far back that high pressure over Scandinavia is forced. It's forced right way back towards western Russia there, actually. And going through to Saturday the 18th of August and to Sunday the 19th, well, that low pressure is very much dominant. It's a major upper trough now sitting right over the top of the country. It's turning cooler as well here by Sunday the 19th. We're trying to bring down a north or northwesterly wind, so this couldn't be more different really to the GFS. This is very unusual to see the ECM and the GFS so far apart here, but it just goes to show you that when you get into these block situations with Scandinavian blocking, it does get quite uncertain. The confidence falls. Of course, we're into the tropical storm and hurricane season now, and whilst hurricanes don't really affect us directly most of the time, they do have a big impact on the overall northern hemisphere setup. So reliability, when you've got hurricanes and tropical storms in the Atlantic, does tend to drop right away a lot of times through August and September, because the models aren't particularly good at handling those tropical storms and hurricanes, and that's often one of the big reasons why model reliability in August, September does get quite low. Finally, the Canadian model for GEM, we've got low pressure here to the west of the country on Tuesday the 14th, and if we run through these charts again, we'll see what happens with that low pressure. It goes much more the way of the ECMWF actually, the low pressure becoming very dominant here from the Atlantic through the course of next week, turning very unsettled, not particularly cold probably, but certainly very unsettled, lots of showers and longer spells of rain. Again, this is quite a lot different to the GFS, but GFS is looking quite isolated this morning with its idea of the weather settling down and becoming quite warm again next week. The Canadian and the European models are both it's signalling really that weather is going to turn increasingly unsettled and possibly even quite cool by the time we get through to next weekend. Now, as I say, this is uncertain. I'm not sure what is happening with this, really, where this is going next week, so I have to keep an eye on it. But certainly between the Canadian and the European models, it does look as though we may well be turning increasingly unsettled next week with heavy rain, and probably by next weekend cooler temperatures as well. But otherwise, temperatures next week shouldn't be too bad, but probably turning increasingly unsettled. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.